Two-factor authentication is a nice one, because you always need. What you could do is maybe test against if you want to do automated testing, you should test against an automated SPN or something like that if you're using Azure, or an account that you have, let's say incognito or whatever that you have. The MFA part is the hardest part, but if you have something which is used as a managed identity or a system user, then use that. Yeah? And try to get those, if you're doing the calls in your code, try to do those with, let's say, key vault calls with an authenticated user, for instance. That would be a solution. A solution. Not the solution, but a solution. Right? All right. Now, we started playing right. All our actors are beefed up and we're going to the scene, right? And we need to set up the scene. And setting up the scene means we have hardware to set up. I'm walking on a scene right now. It's not that high, but at least I can have a nice overview. And as an actor, the scene is your stage, right? You want to be there. Now, we need to make sure that we don't get through this thing, right? If I start jumping on this, I don't want to end up on the floor. Now, it's only like 15 centimeters high, so that wouldn't be too hurtful. But if you are like a meter up, you don't want to go through there. So for this, we have testing of the infrastructure. Now, for the sake of time, there's a couple of things that you can use here. For those who are using ARM in Azure, hey, I'm a Microsoft guy. I'm not going to talk about AWS. But if you want to test ARM or Bicep, there's tools available for that. For ARM, there's still ARM-TTK validating the APIs that you're going to call and getting a full list back of what best practices that you have using the setup of these ARM services. If you want to do this with Bicep, there's this thing called Bicep Lint that you can do since a couple of, actually since last year, that you can actually check and validate all the things that are there. There's an additional tool, which I'm going to talk about later on in the context of security, which is called PS Rule. And this is really, really useful because this will validate policies and templates that are tested on the best practices on Azure. All right? So, going to skip the demos here, but we also want to have tryouts and rehearsals, the big rehearsal, the general rehearsal. And for this, we're going to make sure that our environment doesn't flunk when we are starting to do that. And for this, we have something called Azure Load Testing. Azure Load Testing is a service now in service for what, a year and a half, something like that. It's based upon high-scale load testing, based upon JMeter files and JMeter technology. Yeah? So we're doing this at scale. And the beauty about this thing is you get a lot of information back. But not only that, you can use your existing JMeters with a little bit of adaptation, because there's a small footprint there. With a little bit of adaptation, you can just use your existing JMeters and test them against Azure Load Testing with your environment. Cool thing is they just came up with something new 2 weeks ago that you can now do Azure Load Testing immediately from Azure App Services. There's a new, he's going like, what, wait? Yeah, I'm going to show you. So I have here my Azure environment. I only have to see where my mouse is. That's over here. There we go. I have here my Azure environment. I'm going to go to App Services. Of course, when you need it, you don't find it. I'm just going to open any of these. Let's take this one for a second. From here out, you can now start doing load testing immediately in preview for performance testing directly from your app service. Now, what does this do? And for that, I'm just going to go to my app service, to my load testing service immediately. So I'm going to go into this load testing. There we go. I'm going to do this one for a second. What does Azure Load Testing do? Well, it actually scales up the testing, the users, the things that you want to test against. So this can be HTTP requests, this can be JMeter scripts. You can even set this up in a CI/CD pipeline, which I did here. So the test that I'm going to run, if you take a look at the test, I'm going to highlight this one. The things that I'm testing against here, so there's a test plan that I have. It's a JMX file. You can download it. You can change it. You can re-upload it again. Or some parameters that you can set. And then you can provide the load the number of engines, what kind of traffic that you want to test against, and you can configure all these testing criteria from here out. And so there's a lot of things that you can actually cover here. But the cool thing is when you execute these, you go in there, you see all these test runs coming up. Now, it starts off first with the application, of course. This is what you want to test at first. But the real testing behind it is also the combination and the aggregation of all the data in combination with the underlying infrastructure and the underlying usage that we have. Yeah? So here you see that I have a load of total requests of 32,000. It took me about 6 minutes, and I get a nice in view on the number of users that I have virtually maxed out in regards to the requests, and they all follow up, as you can see. There's a lot of information coming back. But the cool thing is that it will not only show you the application side, it will also show you the server-side metrics. And you can add up any kind of infrastructure that is related to the solution that you're building. So if you have a database, you can actually see that into regards of that too. Storage accounts, you can see that into regards of that too. So there's a lot of information that you can take a look at, seeing from a operational point of view how well your site will be performing on the load. And as you can see, there's also things like Cosmos DB. So there's a lot of choice that you can do. You can just add the app components here, saying which fields or which components or services are being used for your environment. But there's even more than that, because the real beauty lies in the additional detailed insights that you can have. I hope I clicked. Seems I have not. There's a lot of more reporting coming from this one. And for those who are knowledgeable about application insights, this will actually give you kind of the same feedback, the kind of same reports back, like application crashes, but also whether it was down, and there's like health check features. There's a lot of more reporting where that came from. So here is my web app slow. It will actually validate based upon all the data that it has, and it will even give you some recommendations if you have them. Here we have, for instance, memory analysis, showing is there a lot of memory. The memory consumption is good, so you also get some feedback immediately on the numbers that you tested against. Now, it comes with a grain of salt. If you want to have a deeper knowledge on this, there's a very good session by that guy over there, Michiel, and together it's still with fun that you're doing that, right? Yeah, they did it a couple of times, and probably will be showing somewhere again in the Netherlands this year. I advise you strongly to go and take a look at it and learn a little bit more about Azure Load Testing for that. And as I mentioned, you can also do this in CI/CD. I did the same thing again in GitHub, where I just deployed the JMX file and just kicked it off after the deployment of my web app, and you actually get the results right back. Now, when we're going to get on stage, we don't want chaos. Yeah, but chaos will always happen. Hence why we say break a leg on the theater. The agent of chaos, Joker, my dear friend, chaos is something that we need, because this will actually test whether our environment is viable when something is happening. Imagine a data center goes down. Never bet on one region, by the way. Imagine your database goes down. Imagine networking crashes. These are the things that you want to validate against and test against if you are conscious about building a solution. Now, what is Chaos Studio? Chaos Studio is actually a set of fault libraries that you can inject inside of your environment and actually really start testing against these kind of failures. Some examples that you can find here is on the agent-based side. So these are the things that you actually install on a VM. By the way, if you're doing cloud native, don't do VMs. But if you have to, let's say, for instance, that you still have some Oracle database or some line of business application that you're not able to run as a PaaS component, you can actually just inject that agent and start actually triggering those failures, like disk I/O or disks that are full. Many times we have that in the past. Oh shit, we cannot do anything anymore on our database server because why? The disk is full. True story, right? But you can also have this on Service Direct. Let's say for AKS, we want to cut out the network in our Kubernetes environment. We all know that Kubernetes is still an infrastructure product, and networking is a true thing in there. whether you're doing it through Azure CNI or whether you're doing it through Kubernetes, there's a very high volatility on networking in Kubernetes. So this is really something that you need to keep in mind, right? So hence why we actually do fault injection on the networking stack and actually kick out the network and see how your services will react to that. Right? And there's other things like Cosmos DB failovers, forcing them and do retry policies, fault tolerance, and all these things. Right? For the sake of time, I'm not going to demo this, not fully. That is, I'm going to show you where you can find it and what it looks like, because the demo takes a little bit too long and I still have a lot of ground to cover. So Chaos Studio, you can actually have with targets and experiments, and it's the experiments that count. So here I have an experiment, and if I click this thing open and you take a look at the experiment itself, you actually generate a kind of a tree view. I thought I clicked edit, but all right. Second, so it's actually a tree view where you start cascading all these different failures that you wanna evaluate and that you wanna actually simulate, because it's a simulation. We do this at scale too, and then you're gonna say, no, it's always errors that you have at the data centers. Those days were in the past, but we still test this on a daily basis for all those services to make our services more resilient. Yeah? This is part of our resilience strategy. Now, in this case, I just created a branch specifically for Cosmos DB failover, and I can add many more other actions by just adding additional faults or additional delays. As you can see here, I can actually select all these different faults, and there's a lot more than on the thing that I just showed you. I can even have NSG security rules, no load test, stopping the load test, for instance. It's also something which is on the part now, memory pressure, and so on and so on. So you can actually combine all these things and making sure that these things actually give you a nice set of chaos rules. And if you then run these, what will happen is, if I click on this thing again, there we go. If you start this will actually start emulating and fixing these things. So this one would do a failover of Cosmos DB from one region to another. Right? It takes about 5 minutes to run, so for the sake of time, just believe me, I'm not going to do this. Right? Everybody fine with that? But the result is just that you have a failover, and if your application then has a retry policy, it will actually just retry. You see a glitch in your application just for a second, and then through the magic of Cosmos DB, depending on what kind of replication you set up, you can actually get it better. Graphical representation, if you want to do this in JSON and you want to maintain this through CI/CD and deployment, you can actually do that too. Right, and then it's showtime. Time to secure your seat. Okay? So the guests are coming in, it's showtime. So what will this part be about? Of course, security. Security testing is also something that we tend to forget. Anybody doing security testing today? One guy, the same guy that did unit testing. I don't believe you anymore. We need to talk. Security testing is there's so many tools, and a lot of developers lack the knowledge or lack the time to actually do and invest in these kind of things. Yeah? And it's mostly the time. I'm not saying that you're all bad people. I'm just saying that you are under pressure of management or whatever. So we're going to leave it there. But if there's one thing that you really need to do when you're doing testing is looking at PS rule, specifically if you're doing Azure. Who is not doing Azure here? One girl. Well, two girls and then two guys. Yeah. All right. Shame on you. Yeah, that's what they all say. So what is PS rule? Well, PS rule is actually, it tests and documents your infrastructure as code. And infrastructure as code is nothing dirty for a developer. It's something that you also actively contribute to. And you want to make sure that you do the correct thing. What it does, it actually does a lot of testing with pre-built tests based upon certain policies that you can validate against best practices inside of Azure. It's a command line that you can run, so you can run it in any kind of CI/CD setup. But the cool thing about this thing is that it will actually support Azure templates and Bicep. Now, why would you do this? Well, everybody probably heard about the So this is what you want to do, where you want to set up. But actually, I was looking for this thing. No, yeah, okay, kind of this thing. What it's actually based on, it's based upon the well-architected framework. Everybody here know about the well-architected framework? All right. So well-architected framework is nothing Microsoft specific. It exists for every cloud. We have 5 pillars. The Amazon guys have 5 pillars, and Google only has 4. Not because they're cheap. No, they integrated 2 into 1, which makes kind of sense. But they are actually based upon best practices I already mentioned. Now, the cool thing here, and I'm going to show you, I've written a PS rule test inside of my GitHub Actions. Again, yeah, I'm a kind of a fan, but it makes it easy for me to execute these things, and they're very nice and visible. If I only were to say, here we are. So I'm going to go back to my GitHub environment. I think I had it open. Yeah, here it is. And that's security. That's one. Is it this one? All right, whatever. GitHub.com, and I'm going to go to the PS rule demo. Yeah, there we are. So these are some actions this is an action that I'm running on a regular basis. Now, it's red. It's normal. It should be red because I have explicit failures in there to show you what's going on here. So if I take a look at the build itself, it will actually check at a certain point in time. Here you have. What kind of, I'm just going to make it a tad bigger. Like, for instance, here you see. Oh, it tests, for instance, against deployments. It tests against Azure Key Vault, for instance, and it checks whether things have passed or not. And for instance, here, there's a fail here for the Key Vault firewall. I didn't set up a firewall for my Key Vault. Why? You don't want to expose your Key Vault to the outside world and give everybody access to it. That's why it fails. It's a best practice. Now, this is all nice if you have this in your CI/CD, but there's a solution called PS Rule Workbook that you can actually inject inside of Log Analytics that you can use. And this gives you a very nice view. Go to my dashboards. This gives you a very nice view of the results of these PS rule tests. And as you can see here, all these 5 pillars of the WAF, or the well-architected framework, are coming back, and it gives you a nice overview of where you failed, whether it's at cost level, whether it's security level. And this is what the point I was talking about. This is a security testing. It combines the PS rule together with some of the things that we have in Azure Security Center, or now called Defender CSPM. Marketing people, it's a thing, but it makes more sense. Right? And you can actually take a look on where it came from a bicep module, where it came from an ARM template, how many pipelines has been running. If I then take a look at the security factor, for instance, you can actually see all the things, all the rules that have been assessed, all the rules that have been failing, and you can actually do a drill down at a certain point in time, looking at all the important stuff that you need to settle, and you actually get a nice feedback here, and this is where actually you get all the rules in result of the Key Vault where I failed with my firewall. Okay? If you click on that link, you will actually get the full documentation of the rule that has failed and why it has failed, and what you need to do to mitigate that. Very important. It also gives you recommendations back to the reliability, resiliency, and so on. Really necessary to test your infrastructure at scale. There's also a little new thing, but it's not that new. It's called AZQR. It's a quick review. It also does some testing, also in regards to security, but also in regards to other stuff. It's not the same as PS rule, but it also does other checks too. Also open source, PowerShell, and it comes with a nice Power BI dashboard and a nice Excel file that you can use that data on again. So it gives you some nice feedback there. Ooh. I still have 8 minutes to go and 200 more slides. This is going to be exciting. Other testing that you need to do as a developer is, of course, test your code. For that, we have nowadays GitHub Advanced Security in 2 flavors, Azure DevOps and GitHub Actions. Do either, whatever. If you don't want to invest that heavily into these tools, because you don't want to buy a license, or I know by Microsoft I should be selling licenses. I'm no sales, by the way. But there's something that you might be able to use in combination with other tools that you already have. And there's something that so CodeQuell, you probably all heard about it. It's a SQL-esque language that you can use against your code base, where you can just start looking at certain failures that you might recognize or certain bad practices in coding. Yeah. And you can have a full dashboard on top of that, which can report back in SATIF. SATIF is a generic logging mechanism for errors and security issues. And if you take a look here, I think it's this one. This one? It's not this one, but I'm just going to open this one here. It will report back into the security status as code scanning. It will give you all these nice code issues back where you say it's a critical thing where you have validation disabled by default. But the tool that I'm going to also show you is the tool that is coming back, not as CodeQL, but everything underneath that. There's a little kind of sweet NuGet package called the Microsoft Security DevOps CLI. It's a mouthful. What this does, it actually is called Project Guardian. We used to have that in the past as a premier thing. Now you can use this to integrate this back into something called Defender for DevOps, and it will report back. And the tools that are in there are antivirus testing, but also things like Trivy, things like BinScheme, template analyzer, doing it at scale for both Terraform and Bicep and ARM. And there you can actually validate your entire solution, your code, and your deployment against security issues. You can run this locally with the Guardian command line, and there you can test things like, I want to validate my templates against security issues. You can actually do that with Terraform, the same thing. In the past, there even used to be cred scan in here. For those who are paying attention, that was now a paying part inside of the GitHub ecosystem, where we do the secret scanning. That used to be in there. Unfortunately, we pulled that out. But all right, still got 5 more minutes, if I'm not mistaken. Right? Ooh, I'm on a roll. All right. Now, reserved seating. We all have inclusive and diversity thinking. The one thing that we tend to forget is accessibility. Who is today doing accessibility development? Nice show of hands. That's good. There's also a session going on later on. I thought so. And there's one tool. I hope I'm not stealing your thunder here. All right, cool. Is it supporting you? All right, good. So accessibility goes on many levels, and it's not only for people with, and I always find it hard to say, but people with disabilities, because I don't see them as disabilities. It's just a little bit different that they have. Yeah? But hearing issues, visual issues, it's about actually everybody, because accessibility is a global thing. It doesn't always have to go about people who are handicapped. I mean, I also have a handicap. I come from Antwerp, according to some people, or Belgium, right? But accessibility insights is something really, really cool. Why? Because this will actually check some of your websites, some of your applications against the A11Y standards and some of the accessibility standards that your application should have. And if it were only just to make your application better, this will actually already help you in getting more traction of any kind of application. Like, for instance, one thing that I've always find cool in this thing is, and I'm going to go back to my website, which I presented earlier, so this one. And for those who paid attention, there's this little icon here. I don't know whether you can see it. It's called Accessibility Insights. You can install it as a web extension, as a browser extension. If I do this, I can actually start doing some tests here. Now, the thing that I'm going to do here, I'm just going to do some fast pass testing. There we go. Put this to the right. Now, yeah, of course, then you misclick yourself, and then you have that. Put this to the left. Here we go. So what this does here, this does some automated checks here, area allowed, attributes. So these are the testing capabilities that you have out of the box by means of standards. Universally approved standards. The one thing that I found really, really useful, because the one thing that everybody fails against is tab stopping. You all know that, right? So I'm just going to click here for a second. and I'm going to do a little bit of testing here. So I'm going to click inside of my application. I'm going to do tabbing. I start up in the left-hand corner. Look where we're going. 1. Oh, there's already a failure detected. Why? Well, you'll figure it out in just a second. Look, it's going to go from 1 to the next one. So it's moving over. Then it's going back to where is it now? It's gone, right? Bottom line, and now we are back up again. Oh, it's going back down again. It's going wholly full. This is wrong, people. This is annoying. Imagine doing your tax returns like this, right? So this is how even stupid things for us make accessibility more understandable, right? For everything else accessible, go to that young lady's session because she's awesome. She rocks, I know. But this is something that you can test against and that you should be doing testing against. And you can also automate this at scale. I think I said automation a lot, right? But that's the intent. So you can do this at CI/CD. You can even do this for Windows specifically. You can do this for Android. And there's more tests where that came from. And just highlighting some of these things. So the things that you can do and play around with accessibility insights.io. Shine a light on the stage, be a diamond. I love my stage time, I love the light on me, I love sharing my knowledge with you. I'm a diamond, I shine. Right, maybe a little bit too hard sometimes, but as long as I don't burn up like Phoenix, all is fine. One thing that I also want to show you, it's standing here as Microsoft Graph Developer Proxy for those who want to do mocking against APIs. And it says Microsoft Graph Developer Proxy. It's no longer called that way. It used to be called M365 Proxy, and now it's just called Developer Proxy. Why? Because it goes beyond the graph. What it can do API mocking, it can do testing against any API, it can even automate this thing, simulating errors and all these nice things, making sure that you get some feedback on this. Now, the cool thing here is I had it open since the beginning of my session. Here it is. No, or it was here. Ah, here it is. Yeah. So on the left-hand side is the developer proxy, and you see all the results back. Now, this is because my OneDrive is syncing in the background and is doing all these graph calls. But I can easily just do any injection of a API call. For instance, here I have a Chuck Norris call, Chuck Norris jokes. I do an invoke of this, and you will actually see that it's getting some of the information back. It does a request. The request is passed through this endpoint. You get more information, and you can actually test against 429 errors and all these things. If you have a mocking file next to that, it will also start mocking the results. Pretty cool, right? Again, a free tool. Start using it. Start automating that stuff. All right. That almost brings me to the end. Of course, any session of Microsoft today, by the way, I'm doing this out of community feeling, not because out of Microsoft, but since I work for Microsoft, it should contain something AI. No. But if you are going to do AI, and if you are going to do OpenAI or something like that, you should also test your prompts. You should also test your flows. You should also do that kind of stuff. And for this, you need to develop your prompt. And for those who don't know, this is the guy, the prompter, the souffleur in Dutch. I don't have one here. But you need to test against the prompt results and actually test the LLM and the model itself. So you should run this, and this is your area of interest when doing testing. Running the flow against sample data and running the test against larger data again. For this, there's something called prompt flow. And prompt flow doesn't only visualize your prompts and how you can run your full setup of your environment, but it will also validate and evaluate your prompt itself, seeing the results and how they come back. You have nice reporting going back, evaluating the temperature, evaluating all the different angles, and you can use these results to fine-tune your prompting, and this is where you should do the testing. This comes with the concept of LLM ops. It's a mouthful, it's a tongue twister too. And you can actually do experimentation by executing the flows, deploying by using it in deployment through, let's say, something like Kubernetes, if you want to run it locally, A/B deployments, it's these kind of tests that you want to run against. And if you then push this back into Azure DevOps or inside of GitHub Actions, you can actually see how your flow will be running and how well your prompt will react to the future. And then we're finally there. The applause, the laughter, the feedback. Remember that first word that I gave you? Now it's time for you to give me your feedback. No, not yet. You're always too fast. But there's one tool that I haven't mentioned yet, and that's Clarity. And Clarity is actually a tool that everybody sees as a marketing tool, but I see it as an accessibility tool. And you're probably going to say, Mike, you're an idiot. Where do you come up with that? Well, I'm going to show you, and I'm going to show you how you can use it as your benefit for accessibility testing. So what is Clarity? Clarity is actually a scan of your website, everybody using it. I clicked on the dashboard. It gives you nice feedback, and I'm going to go over the segmentation of the custom. I have a segment here that actually does this. I do this every single time I access my site. This data will get pushed up, so I have nothing to worry about. I just injected a small token inside of my HTML file, and this will work. What this will give you, and this is really, really nice, it will actually show you a heat map of your environment. And this is perfectly for accessibility testing, because apparently a lot of people are clicking on here, but nothing works here. There's a heat map here. And this is what we call rage clicking. If a link doesn't work, there's something wrong with your site. And this is visual feedback on how things aren't working. So this is how you can use a marketing tool as a testing tool against usability. It does a lot more because it also has recordings. You can view all the recordings of these little items. So if I click on this thing, it will load me the recording. You can play it back, and you can actually see what your users anonymized are doing. All right? So this is a very cool tool that you can use for free. It's just a site. You just onboard it inside of your index HTML, and you're gone. A lot of reading on top of that. There's other stuff that you can do here, like the rage clicking, the heat mapping. The dashboards are a little bit new today since last month. I didn't update the slides on that. Sorry about that. And more features are here. All right. Oh, wait, there's more. There's also still test management if you're doing Azure DevOps, because you want to use your test cases. And there used to be something called test-based, but unfortunately they pulled the plug on that like last week. So we actually canceled it. So don't have to worry about it. All right, being. What's the time? Yeah, I went over 5 minutes late. Abria. That's all, folks, and thank you for listening.